The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is today holding urgent talks with US President Donald Trump in a bid to secure an exemption from sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminium. Donald Trump has announced he intends to slap blanket tariffs of up to 25% on steel and aluminium imports.
The move could affect around $1 billion of Australian exports, but even if Australia gets its way, there are fears of a trade war between China and the US that could still have consequences for our economy. We'll hear from political reporter Pablo Vinales in Canberra on this. But first, let's go to North America correspondent Carrington Clark. Hi, Carrington. The President is about to speak. What can we expect to hear from him?
Yeah, so we believe that the President will be signing an executive order. This is one of the powers that the President holds to sign these documents, effectively ordering that these tariffs be imposed, effectively saying there's an emergency of sorts that he needs to deal with. He has flagged that it will be a 25% tariff on all imports of steel and aluminium into the United States. At this point, he's saying there will be no exemptions, but this does echo what we saw Donald Trump do in his first term. And on that occasion, Australia was able to get an exemption, as were some other countries. So the question now is whether or not Donald Trump is going to echo that policy, or perhaps even more importantly, echo what he just did when it came to Canada and Mexico, when he said that they would be hit with new tariffs. And it seemed to come up just right up until the last minute that he did a deal with them, which saw the tariffs that were going to be imposed on all their exports into the United States delayed for 1 month. But this is a worrying prospect for countries that export those two metals to the United States, but it's also a worry for the global economy, because even if countries aren't directly impacted, for example, if Australia was to get an exemption, we could see a global downturn in growth, and that would have indirect costs to countries like Australia if, for example, we saw China badly impacted by this. Donald Trump is also suggesting we will see reciprocal tariffs. Any country that currently has a tariff on the United States, he'll be paying in kind. But we are just waiting for the details on this. Again, markets, on one hand, need to take Donald Trump seriously because he has shown a history of being willing to impose tariffs, but he also has a history of using tariffs as leverage to get something else from individual countries. So it's unclear at this stage which of those two categories this is likely to fall into.
All right, Carrington, thank you. And Pablo, when can we expect the Prime Minister to speak with Donald Trump? We understand that conversation is imminent.
Yeah, Bridget, good morning. The Prime Minister confirming that phone call in Parliament was scheduled just hours after the President announced those tariffs. We don't have an exact time, though. We understand it will take place this morning. This will be the first phone call between the pair since Mr Albanese congratulated the President upon his election win last year. And you can imagine that the Prime Minister will be pushing Australia's case for an exemption on those tariffs. Of course, Australia has a trade surplus with the United States, and it also has had a free trade agreement for the past 20 years. And certainly the case that the Australian government has been making publicly, and you can expect this to be made behind closed doors as well, is that the US runs a large trade surplus with Australia, basically meaning we buy a lot more than the US purchases from us. And this was certainly the case that was put forward under the first Trump administration in 2018, when then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was able to secure a carve-out. Mr Turnbull was speaking with the ABC 7:30 program last night, though he's saying that the circumstances this time round may be different.
It may be that this Trump is determined to impose this tariff on every country, no matter what, and in which case it won't be possible to secure an exemption. All the Australian Prime Minister can do is use all of his advocacy skills and play a straight bat and defend the Australian national interest.
Now, the opposition has also been pressuring the government on how it approaches this. They say it will be a test for Australia's ambassador to the United States, Kevin Rudd, who has previously been critical of President Trump. Bridget, we should note that in 2018, it did take some time for Australia to secure that carve-out. It took about 12 months for that deal to come into place.